So I just got back from Iceland and I popped to the forest to go hug a tree or two, as you do, only to realise that the floor is absolutely littered with mushrooms. And so scrap any plans that I had for this week because nature has provided.
A big thanks to MPB for sponsoring today's video.
Oh my god, there is fungi absolutely everywhere.
This week I'm embarking on an adventure, the Great Fungi Hunt.
Oh my god, look at these.
Multiple days, multiple approaches, but one magical fungal wonderland. Over the next few days I'll be chasing spores, bending light, and getting close up with some of nature's little characters.
There are so many different variations of fungus all over the forest floor that it's really difficult to know where to start, and it's incredibly overwhelming. And when I do pick one out and start to work with it, it's easy to become distracted by, okay, oh, look at this one here, oh, look at that one over there. So I'm finding it almost stressful to begin with. So I think I've gone into a bit of a panicked state, to be honest, because there are just so many mushrooms suddenly, and I need to see them all, I need to photograph them, and what if they're not here tomorrow? What if I don't find any for the rest of the week? So I'm going to just kind of try and work through that energy today, expel that panicked energy by just taking photos. And so I have a few photos in the bag in case the rest of this little project doesn't go to plan. And it just will then take the pressure off and I can just enjoy it a little more without that panicked energy. Who gets stressed about mushrooms? Apparently I do.
I've definitely been feeling a bit of FOMO lately, and I understand why. The last couple of autumns just haven't gone the way I'd hoped for my photography. Last year especially, I barely took any photos at all. And because this is my favourite time of year, I really just want to make the most of it. To be out there enjoying every moment, every subject, anything that nature decides to throw my way. And nature is incredibly fleeting and changes so fast.
Well, I think I have expelled a bit of the panic and taken some images that I'm pretty happy with, so I've definitely got the ball rolling. It's been challenging because there have been many foragers come through today with really big bags, buckets and baskets. Try to say that fast. Bags, buckets, baskets, bags, buckets, baskets, bags, buckets, baskets. Yes, picking all the edible ones, which did send me into a bit of a tiz for a while, but it's all good. I think now we're going to go deeper into the forest and see what else we can find.
Well, hopefully the foragers don't pick them all. For day 2 I decided on a little photo walk, focusing on handheld single-shot images only. So I brought out the OM1 for its image stabilisation.
I have a feeling I'm going to bend or break this rule pretty quickly. However, I am going to try and focus on single-shot handheld images.
And I did pretty much break this rule instantly after spotting these pinwheel-like porcelain mushrooms, and I just had to capture all of the detail.
I really can't help myself. in focus bracketing, but it just gets so much detail in the image. However, if you don't want to bracket, what are your options in order to get more in focus? So you can use a narrower aperture, but you've got to be careful with that because you may bring more background details into view, which could, depending on your scene, be a little distracting. So the other option instead is to simply move further away from your subject, and in creating more distance you're actually going to get more in focus. But the problem now is your subject is smaller and further away, so the composition has changed and you may need to crop in post-processing. So this is essentially why I choose to bracket personally. I don't have to crop in post, I just get it all in camera and I can get that nice, soft, blurry background as well. I absolutely love this character here that I have found. The cap is split, the gills curling outwards slightly, and to me it just looks like a mop of curly hair. At this angle, which I'm really happy with, the only problem is there is this fallen branch right in the background that's just creating this harsh line cutting through the image, and it's unavoidable. I cannot move this branch, it's so big and heavy. And I'm not sure really if it's as big of a distraction as I'm making it out to be, or if it sort of adds to the image. But let me know what you think.
I realised at this point that if I kept going at this rate, I was going to have far too many photos to stack and edit, which may overwhelm editing Courtney. So I decided to slow it down.
You know what? One scene, one subject, one photograph that makes me enthusiastic enough to print it, that's not going to be difficult at all. So I've come to check out a tree that I scouted at the beginning of the year, and as I had hoped, it has fungi growth. And look at all of this, it's incredible. We've got mushrooms growing on the top, old and new growth, and just look in the hollow gap of this tree trunk, they're just growing all the way through. I could really go with any of these and I think I would get a good image. But I think I'm particularly drawn to these four in the tree trunk here. They're in very, very good condition, sort of isolated by themselves. And I think I could really play with contrast, sort of shadow and light here. So I'm starting off with a portrait shot, and I may experiment with a horizontal version as well. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm using the lip of this gap in the tree trunk as framing elements at the top and bottom to draw your eye into the middle to these wonderful mushrooms. Now it's pretty dark in there. You can only just see the edges of the caps, so I am going to throw an LED light in there, but I'm not going to make it super strong. I'm going to make it quite a soft, subtle light, just so it draws out some more texture, some more detail, and you can see the stems of these fantastic fungi.
I focus bracketed this scene, but only for the funguses themselves. I didn't want a lot of that bark detail in the background. But I think this image turned out really well. While I'm warming up the printer, I just want to take a moment to thank MPB for sponsoring today's video. Sometimes you just know when it's time to change gear, and MPB makes it quick, easy and hassle-free to do exactly that. Whether you're buying used camera gear or passing yours on, MPB lets you sell and trade without even leaving your house. Just fill out their instant quote form to see what your kit is worth, book a fully insured courier, and once your gear arrives, MPB pays you within days, or ships your new piece of kit straight to your door. I use MPB because it's just so much easier in comparison to other marketplaces. I recently traded in a few lenses with them and the process was just really simple. Between workshops, traveling, filming, editing, whatever it is I have going on, sometimes I just don't have the time to run to the post office or a drop-off point to go and queue in order to pop something in the mail. And so the fact that MPB just takes care of most of it for you is really convenient. If you're looking to sell or trade in your kit, then I do highly recommend MPB, so I'll leave a link in the description box if you'd like to go check them out. Otherwise, thank you so much MPB for sponsoring today's video. This did not turn out well. Now, there's nothing wrong with the image is beautiful. However, my printer has decided it's going to take this moment to malfunction and it's printing all of my oranges and reds in a rather pinky tone, which, despite wearing a pink jacket, I'm really not fond of the colour pink. So really not feeling this effect. And yeah, typical. Technology never works when you need or want it to work, but I've done a whole bunch of, I've spent a while tinkering with my printer, sort of checking the ICC profiles and printing on different papers, updating the firmware, doing nozzle head checks and checking the cartridges and whatnot, and still getting pink, so I'm gonna have to do a power clean, which unfortunately requires more ink than that's currently in my printer in order to do so. So by the time that I've ordered some ink and done that, I'm way past filming this video, I'm afraid. So you're just gonna have to trust me when I say that this is gonna be a good print. Maybe I can just color grade this bit of footage for you so you can get an idea of what that should look like versus what it currently looks like. And yeah, that's a shame because I was going to print a few other images that I've taken in this video as well. But never mind, I can do that at a later date. Anyway, Courtney, what are we up to next?
The category is stages of growth. It's really nice when you can get pristine fungi, but realistically in wild nature, you know, they're going to be disrupted, disturbed, half-eaten. They break down after a day, a couple of days, and they're not going to be perfect, the majority of mushrooms that you find. However, they still have a lot of story and character. So on this single tree trunk here, we have a mixture of both old and new growth, and I find this absolutely fascinating how I have a cluster here that I'm framing up of new growth fungi, just this group that's just bursting through this seam of this tree trunk, almost in a hurry, trying to grow as quickly as possible, stumbling over each other as they do so. Meanwhile, this older growth here has a slowness, a weariness to it as it starts to break down, and I love how the caps, when they become older, just develop a completely different texture, almost a rougher texture, and the stems start to sort of curl and twist in various ways. There are a few species of fungi that I can't help but want to photograph them when they're in pristine condition. One being these porcelain mushrooms. They're so ethereal looking.
These are one of my favourite varieties of fungi, and it's surprising to see so many of them at the moment, especially as over the past few years they've been difficult to find. However, this year is particularly abundant in fungi in general for a specific reason.
So essentially the conditions over spring and summer this year have triggered a mass dew, which is every so many years, sort of 2 to 5 years, where trees will overproduce in seeds and berries and nuts and that kind of thing. And this extra organic matter on the forest floor is fantastic for fungi. When you add then in moisture and autumn rainfall, it's just an absolute explosion this year of fungi, which I'm certainly going to make the most of, especially as the year after a mast year doesn't tend to be as abundant in fungi because trees and nature doesn't quite have the same energy to produce all of this fantastic growth. So I'm certainly making the most of it.
And making the most of it, I certainly am. You're probably thinking, Courtney, how much more is there? Well, here's another photo, and another one, and another. But don't worry, this is my last round of foraging before I have completely mushroomed myself out. For now, anyway. Having briefly experimented with illuminating fungi with light to create dramatic and moody effects, I wanted to try this again.
So the process here is quite simple, but it involves some editing. So essentially what I'm going to do first is I'm going to focus bracket a underexposed version of this scene with no light. I'm not going to add light to it. And I'm going to choose a cool white balance so that it sort of gives a sort of dark nighttime feel. Now I'm going to run a second stack, and this time I'm going to use an LED light, and you don't have to use portable LED lights, you can probably just use a torch or the torch on your phone. And I'm going to position this above the caps, make them really bright, golden and luminous. In post-processing, I'm essentially going to blend these two images together using masks and layers, and I will show you how to do that later on. But hopefully this turns out in the way that I have envisioned it.
Unfortunately, this first image didn't turn out as planned. I accidentally nudged my tripod slightly, which threw off the composition between stacks. Luckily, I had better success with a few other scenes. This technique is less about documenting the fungi I find, and more about creating dreamlike, imaginative landscapes that blend reality with a touch of fantasy. When editing in Photoshop, I start by layering the underexposed image beneath the one with the illuminated subject. I then use a masking layer to paint light exactly where I want it to shine. It takes time, but I use the brush tool and I lower the opacity so that I have full control over how much glow, how much light I bring through. I'm certainly going to experiment more with this in the future because I had a lot of fun, and I didn't really do glowing caps necessarily or sort of bioluminescent fungi. I kind of just lit them a bit more dramatically than I normally do, sort of taking the light out of the surrounding landscape so that the subject really just stands out that bit more. A couple of the images didn't work. The very first one that I tried, I managed to knock my tripod and shift the composition very slightly in between stacks so it didn't blend together well at all. And a second one, a cluster of fungi, two of the caps had shifted, which kind of gives me the impression that perhaps there was an insect or something crawling around beneath within the caps, and sort of just shifted things a little bit. But yeah, I would definitely love to give this a go a bit more. The leaves are starting to turn now, so I think it's time for me to turn my attention to woodland and landscape photography. The weather's looking pretty dismal, but fingers crossed we get some good autumn weather, some good autumn conditions, and some good images out of it. But I hope you will continue to come along on my autumn adventures with me, and thank you so much for watching today's video. For the curious watchers, here's a rundown of the gear used in this video.